All right, everybody, we're going to get started with panel number 2. Thanks for joining us. So this panel is the Startup Showcase. We're lucky to have 3 amazing founders here with us now. These are top founders. They're going to share insights to growth, their bold ventures, and the disruptive technologies that brought their journeys here today. So we're going to do more of like a fireside-style chat with them and get some of those insights. All right. Starting off, I'm going to do a quick round robin. We'll hand it off to you, Manuel. Why don't you give us an intro and share the quick elevator pitch.
Right. Thank you for having me. I am Manuel Rendon, founder of Timeplast, a chemical technology company. And we are set to change the human interface. Essentially, everything you touch, we want to be part of that. And there's been, in our opinion, an over-allocation of talent to the software sector, but what about the hardware sector? So we're working on that right now, down to a molecular level.
My name is Goetgeluk. I'm the founder and CEO of Virtuix, and we make the Omni. The Omni is an omnidirectional treadmill that lets you walk and run around inside virtual reality games and other applications. And we brought 3 products to market to date, did about $20 million in sales to date, and just launched our first Omni treadmill for the home, Omni One.
I'm Teague Egan. I just spoke on the last panel, but for those that are new here, I run a company called EnergyX, and we are a lithium extraction technology and production company. So we're building 2 lithium projects that will produce hopefully enough lithium for about 1 million electric vehicles per year.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Part of what we want to talk about is that founder journey, right? So all of you, I'm sure there were 2 really important moments. One kind of that initial insights, and then the moment you decided to go all in. Maybe for some of you that moment was one and the same time. But Manuel, for you, what was that initial insight? How did you come about that? And then what was the moment where you're like, oh, I'm going all in on this?
Well, I am a passionate environmentalist. It's my background. I'm an environmental engineer with a major in chemistry, and I was blown away by the Kardashev scale when I was 17 years old. The fact that scientists, when they look into space, they don't look for the tiny green man alien life. They look for type 1, type 2, or type 3 civilization. And essentially, we're type 0, and we're trying to become a type 1 civilization. So anything that would be an existential threat for us to become a type 1 is of my interest, and I think that the microplastification of all living beings it's the biggest problem to solve in terms of existential threat. Even though it's looking like no big deal for now, studies are coming out that are very ridiculous. And so when I noticed that the fact that our planet Earth looks blue from outer space, because nature intended for water to be the universal solvent, yet the most used and consumed material by humans repels water down to a molecular level. So there's got to be something, very wrong happening in the future if we didn't change the grand chemistry of the materials that we use every single day.
Incredible. Can you share just quickly with the audience about Timeplast and what it does to do that? So
essentially,
they get that full picture?
any material that you can think of can be divided in 2 groups, polar and non-polar. For whatever reason, scientists believed back in the 30s that the non-polar materials were, the most amazing thing ever after sliced bread, I guess. So everything you touch, essentially, that's a non-natural material, it's non-polar. So it repels water. Timeplast came into the picture to create materials that are 100% polar so that they adapt to the grand chemistry that I talked about before, and we're aiming not only to substitute plastics but also metal, glass, paper, and so essentially that's what Timeplast does. Timeplast creates polar materials.
Incredible, thank you. Jan, for you, talk to us. What was the initial insight? You were in investment banking before. Were you actually in a similar space to Jan? Were you working in was it oil? And was it the oil space?
Yeah, I was an
Okay.
investment banker with JP Morgan, Natural Resources. But I thought that virtual reality was going to be the next big thing. This was 13 years ago, so I was a bit early, before VR was cool again. And I thought the biggest problem that hadn't been solved yet was how to walk around inside the virtual world. So I thought you need something like a treadmill, but in 360 degrees, omnidirectional treadmill. And I started working on that. And it took quite a while to figure out the right approach. First prototype didn't work at all. I kept working on it. I was still at JP Morgan, so I did this after hours, which is in the middle of the night.
Yeah, few and far between.
Yeah, exactly. But then the breakthrough was I had the first prototype that was working, and I put this video online of me playing Skyrim, big video game, with VR glasses on this big first treadmill I made, and that video blew up online, hundreds of thousands of views, big press cycle. And that's when I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to pursue this, bring this to market. And that's when I quit my day job, which at that time I was probably going to make $400,000-$500,000 that year. And I just said, I'm leaving. I'm going to do this crazy thing. So
Yeah. You went on to pick the hard thing, and
Yeah.
so was that you had built the prototype, and then you're like, all right, got it working well enough, go all in, quit work, go dive in.
pretty much, yeah.
Amazing. Teague, for you, you had told us earlier, part of your start, you were down in Bolivia seeing, untapped lithium, right? Did you, on the flight home, start the business plan? Like, how soon after that initial insight did you just decide go all in, or was it upon that trip you're like, oh, this has to be solved?
Yeah, I'll tell that story, but I have a quick question for Manuel. I might not be the only one wondering this, but if we're a type 0 civilization, what are type 1, 2, and 3 civilizations?
So type 1 civilization is planetary civilization. They have cities in the oceans, they control the weather. All of the technologies are clean technologies and sustainable technologies. Essentially, they can sustain life on a planet for perpetuity. That's a type 1 civilization. Essentially, they outrun their energy sources on the planet, and they become type 2 when they take the energy directly from their mother's sun. So they have like the Dyson sphere, it's essentially solar panels, right, orbiting the sun. And then when that star becomes too dim because of the many solar panels, which is actually a significant portion of what Webb telescope is looking for, is for this mega structures called Dyson spheres, because they present a shift in the light that we get from the sun. Anyway, so when they exhaust their mother sun energy, they become type 3 civilization or stellar civilization. They just go star after star. So we're like 0.9, but there's a big filter hypothesis, which may be why we haven't seen any type 1, 2, or 3 civilization in this space. There may be a great filter that we cannot surpass, or we may become extinct. It's a big concern for many scientists that look far ahead into the future.
Very interesting. So I told my story a little bit earlier, but there's obviously a lot more to that story, right? I have been driving a Tesla since 2013, so actually the same Tesla that I've had for about 12 years now, and basically early believer in electric vehicles. Saw, or at least believed in, the adoption and that kind of hockey stick curve of EV adoptability. But fast forward 5 years, in 2018, that's when I found myself in Bolivia, and I was on the tour of this salt flat, just as a tourist. And the tour guide is the one who started telling me about this is the largest, lithium reserve in the world, blah, blah, blah. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's the town there is only a few thousand people. They have a little airport. The terminal is probably the size of this room, and that's both the arrivals and the departures. And when I was leaving, the place is called Uyuni. The next day, a private plane lands. I think it was probably a G4 or something like that. And I was like, there cannot be too many private planes in Bolivia. This has to be somebody important. My guess is that it's the president of the country or something. So I Google president of Bolivia, and sure enough, it's him.
Holding it up.
And I was like, he's obviously coming to check out, this lithium project. And as soon as I got back to my hotel, I started Googling lithium in Bolivia, like what they're doing. Why are they not producing any lithium from the world's largest deposit? And kind of all those things made me realize like how big of an opportunity this was. And that from that moment on, I was all in.
Wow, incredible insights from the tour guide to a quick Google search.
He was the first person, like, I'm here in Bolivia. I'm like, who the fuck do I talk to about like this? I found my tour guide on LinkedIn asking him if he had any connections to the government of Bolivia. Unfortunately, he didn't, and I had to find other means. But, as an entrepreneur and as a founder, the early days are lonesome, and you're just trying to follow any loose end. I was literally hitting up my tour guide to try to find connections into Bolivia, to try to talk to anybody that would talk to me about this idea. But you have to be relentless and determined, and I'm sure these guys can attest to that too.
Well, thank you for teeing that up. I want to talk about that. Not a lot of tour guides getting slides into their DMs, so incredible work. That relentless attitude, right? So you guys are all doing disruptive things in your own rights, and by nature, disruptive is new. You're going to face a lot of friction in trying to get that across. Jan, let's talk about some of those moments of friction for you guys, whether it was investors or manufacturers, right, or just friends and family being like, "You guys are crazy." So Jan, for you, like, you made the initial prototype yourself. Were people, asking you, "What are you doing?" And did you get any no's? Like, tell us about some of those moments of how you push through being a disruptive technology and people telling you no.
Yeah, the biggest challenge for us has always been fundraising. Our products have always been well received. People love it. We have a big community, big fans. They love what we do. And every time I go to traditional VC investors, as a hardware company, big piece of hardware, VCs run the other way. And so hardware is one industry that needs a lot of capital. Sure, Teagan's industry and business as well, but we need a lot of capital. And then hardware is probably one of the hardest industries to get traditional capital for. So that has always been our main challenge. Now, luckily, equity crowdfunding came about right around the same time that we started. And that has always been a great fit for us because we have, a great community, lots of fans who are not just customers but also want to be investors. And that's been our saving grace, if you will, this method of fundraising.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, at DealMaker, personally, glad to hear that. We help companies raise capital online. Because, when you were talking about the VCs not getting it, my first thought was, some of the ads that we made for you about this, you watch somebody in the Omni and this like excitement that they have. You create these viral moments. It's like, well, can't you just show that to the VC? But, you showing that to the community who has then, backed you all for millions of dollars now and helped with the growth. Yeah, that's a great way to push through that. Yeah. Manuel, for you, polar, non-polar, were people looking at you like you were off in another polar? I don't know how to string that together. What did people say to you when you went off on your endeavor? Did you face any friction?
So I was fortunate enough to work for PepsiCo, one of the largest food companies in the world, and I was at the right place. I was working under the Global Director of Packaging for PepsiCo in Plano, Texas, in the research and development line when I kind of had the opportunity to learn how the industry is thinking about plastics technology and how to move forward. So I could understand how to position myself. When I left PepsiCo to found Timeplast, I convinced my initial partners that I had a technology to convince Nestle, the largest, to invest or to acquire our technology. And so with friends and family funds, we endeavored to convince Nestle, the largest company in the food packaging space, and they did bought our technology for chemical depolymerization of PET. again, if you tap into essentially like a simulation theory, how is it so popular? I think it's because if you look at nature and how nature does it, it's so advanced. So we take notes constantly of how nature deals with, chemical pathways. And so one of our, the technology that Nestle acquired, it's, one of a kind, better than anything else. They did, 19 press releases. All of our bottles are going to be depolymerized with Timeplast technology. But then Nestle Global, I think you were mentioning something like this in your case. Nestle Global decided to get rid of all of the PET businesses, all of the Nestle waters, because they were having a significant issue with, I guess, public image of pollution and whatnot. They were taking too much water out of a well, I guess, in some city. Anyway, so 100% of all of the executives that we're working with were fired, and then Blue Triton acquired that technology, and they put us in the back burner. We were supposed to launch in 2020. But then that didn't happen. And so the former chief sustainability officer that I was working with at Nestle went on to lead a venture capital firm up in Canada. And he offered me, $50 million check. But I noticed that the vision of the company was going to be diluted along with the governance and whatnot. So I said no. And started raising funds and equity crowdfunding.
Incredible. Well, not everybody can say that their MVP, their minimal viable product, was supported by Nestle. So pretty incredible there. So transitioning that over to Teague, right? We're talking about people trying to steer and change your vision. Teague, when you were out raising capital, were you able to, show them the supply-demand imbalance, or, were they saying, do it this way, don't do it that way? How did you maintain that vision that you had on your romantic tour guide journey? How did you keep strong in that? Sorry, I characterized it as romantic.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a very fortunate fundraising journey. I think that in the early days, when you just have a startup and you have no track record of successful exits and things like that, it's always harder for first-time entrepreneurs. I'm not a first-time entrepreneur. I had other businesses, but never a big successful exit. And this business is dramatically different than anything I had done in the past. I was living in California. I was I had an entertainment business, and then I was looking at seed stage investments as a business. And then getting into the lithium industry with this founding story is a bit of an outlier. And I think that while venture capitalists highly value a founder and really look at the team, they underestimated my determination. And determination and optimism are two of the most important characteristics, but they're two of the most unrecognized. It's hard to really gauge that, at least in a few conversations. As we started to pick up momentum in the company, we attracted a lot of institutional investors, and our journey in fundraising has been a hybrid approach where we've been really successful at bringing in the retail markets through crowdfunding, but we've supplemented that, or you could say that we've supplemented our institutional fundraising with crowdfunding. But we've been fortunate enough to bring in big corporate investors, like grade A credit investors such as General Motors, that's probably the most notable name. But then POSCO, which is a huge steel and battery conglomerate out of Korea. A lot of people get that confused. They say Costco is an investor. No.
They'll buy in bulk.
Yeah, they'll buy in bulk. But we were talking about steel in the last panel. This company, POSCO, makes about, I want to say 40 million tons of steel a year. That's about, call it $50 billion in revenue. And then they have a big battery business, battery materials, where they make cathodes, lithium, et cetera. So really, really important strategic investor that has unlimited balance sheet, essentially. I think they have like $13 billion in cash right now, huge balance sheet. And then the third investor is a global oil and gas major called Eni out of Italy, basically the equivalent of like a Chevron or Shell out of, or Total. But having big, credible strategic investors has helped with the crowdfunding, and our crowdfunding has helped attract more strategic institutional investors. So we've used that to leverage each other, and we found that it's worked for us. I think that would work for anybody, but we've been fortunate enough to have that fundraising journey where both sides are interested in investing into something that is really it's supply chain for the future.
Yeah, certainly. Teague, you made me think about it, sort of those unrelenting characteristics. I think it's Paul Graham from YC who talks about you just got to be a cockroach, right? You gotta stick around long enough and you can win, right? Or just don't die. So default alive, I think is how he refers to it, right? So talking about that grip, one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys, some of those low moments, like a moment of where you really had to pull yourself up and find that unrelenting attitude in the face of all that. Jan, for you, how about you? Was it supply related? Was it market related? Was it capital related? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's 100%. I mean, determination. You said it right, Teague. I mean, determination and optimism. I mean, you have to be not just determined, you have to be obsessive about what you do and determined beyond imagination. It gets really hard sometimes. And yeah, our one low moment for us was COVID. And we were in the business of selling Omni Arena based on our technology, a big attraction for entertainment venues. And Dave & Buster's was about to roll it out. And we were still at Dave & Buster's and a lot of entertainment venues nationwide. But that was our bread and butter going into the pandemic. So in a matter of days, I remember I was at a trade show in New Orleans, and we were still selling, and COVID was just starting to unravel in the US, and we were still selling attractions on the show floor, and then just days later, everything was shut down, economy shut down, and our revenues went from $1 million a month to zero. So that was a tough moment. Had to lay off people, furlough, salary cuts, pull all the stops to survive, which we did. But yeah, that was a tough one.
Jesus, incredible. Manuel was the lowest moment. Nestle, you all are doing when they backed out, you all are doing incredible things in the material science. I'd be hard pressed to imagine that was the lowest moment. What about for you? Anything you can share with the audience?
No, not at all. I wish, but now actually, I had an internal fight with some of the original partners. They, because of equity crowdfunding, we were new to the space, so we didn't understand how the voting through proxy of the investors is, that situation, and we all got in not knowing what we were getting into, right? So we essentially, one of my partners, which is it's an attorney, he checked all of the documents. Long story short, they got together with a billionaire investor. I think he is, not to say his name, but he has links to the petrochemical industry. And anyway, so they challenged the proxy, so they sued Timeplast at a pre-revenue stage, and we essentially, put hundreds of thousands of dollars of our very delicate crowdfunded budget to fight this lawsuit, which was ridiculous. Then this billionaire offered a loan. He wanted to get paid back a loan that he had. At the same time, it was like a coordinated attack to acquire the company, I believe, and so that was kind of the worst moment. But thankfully, the rest of the partners saw through this situation and helped me out to get out of that situation. But that was tough. I almost lost my company.
Jeez, wow. I wasn't familiar with that story. That's crazy. Yeah, lawfare, you know, to the startup trying to do the thing. I'd imagine that billionaire investor's name rhymed with schmoke. But anyways, so Teague, for you, I remember being at your facility. I was in one of the shipping containers where some of these like sieves and processing worked, and I could not believe myself. I was like, how is this possible? You know, so you all have created something incredibly innovative, right? What have been some of those moments of, you know, hiccups or friction like that for you? Was there a moment where you're like, yeah, we might not make it?
Many, many. So I will talk about 3 low moments.
Only 3. Good.
3. 2 of them are kind of one and the same, but the first one was, it wasn't a make or break moment, but we spent probably a year putting together our DOE application for one of these big DOE grants that the last administration was giving out. And that would have been all the money we needed to build our Texas project. I think we were asking for about $200 million. And I don't know exactly how many hours we put into this, but it was several 100-page application. It must have been at least maybe 1,000 to a few thousand hours of, like, you know, it's expensive to pay people, and you know, that's a lot of time and money going into that. And we felt really confident in our percentage chance to win this. They ultimately gave about $3 billion away to approximately 20 companies, and 2 companies right in the area that we are developing a project that will produce about 30,000 tons of lithium in the Smackover Formation, which is a geologic formation that goes from Texas into Arkansas that has proven to be one of, if not the best, lithium deposits in the United States. And we're building a demonstration plant there. We had already won a little DOE grant, but we've invested tens of millions of dollars into this project. And there are other lithium companies that are up there. Like Exxon just bought about 100,000 acres there. There's Standard Lithium. And the DOE awarded 2 companies right next to us big grants. And I felt it was just heartbreaking to see the announcement and not be listed and have 2 of our main competitors win that. That was certainly a low moment. But, you know, I cried for a night, and then the next day I got up early and went back into work and kept grinding. That was one. The first 2 are kind of related. We raised our Series A funding about $10 million in April of 2021. And that gave us the money to relocate here to Austin. We moved here in June of 2021. And before that, we were kind of a remote company. We probably had 12 people that were all spread out. I was living in Puerto Rico before this. Moved to Austin, and we got right to work, and we won this pilot bid in Bolivia. So from, I guess, January of 2018, when I first set foot in the Bolivia salt flat, to August of 2021 is when we won the pilot bid. They did a global tender for lithium extraction technology companies to pilot, to extract lithium from their resource. And we won one of 8 slots, and we deployed our first pilot to Bolivia in January of 2022. So 4 years from my first seeing the Salar to putting a pilot there. Yeah, there's, you know, sticking with it is another big attribute required of a founder. But we spent a lot of money doing that and getting this pilot set up and deploying it to the field. And we ran this pilot 24/7 for about almost half a year. It ended in May. And that was expensive. And I was 10 minutes late in turning in our final submission of the report to Bolivia. They said the deadline was like midnight on some day, and Bolivia's a few hours ahead. I was translating this whole 100-page report from English into Spanish, and I sent it to the wrong email, and there's no excuses. It was 10 minutes late, and we ended up getting disqualified from the bid. And of course, they could have accepted us and ignored, being late. I also like to think that there's some geopolitical issues going on. They ended up awarding the commercial contracts to a Chinese company and a Russian company. People in the United States may say, "Oh, Russia," like they're friends with Russia. So, but that was a super low moment, losing that. And we had signed a term sheet for our Series B at the end of 2021, and this company, one of the biggest oil and gas companies in Argentina, was leading our Series B. But they basically were optioning us to see if we won this contract. And when we lost it, they pulled the term sheet. And General Motors was following on to their lead. And I'll never forget, I was in Sweden at this conference called Brilliant Minds. And as soon as I found out, my dad always taught me you have to get up. As soon as you find out something bad, you have to get up and address the crowd or whatever it is. Like, get out in front of. You can't hide when bad things happen. So the first thing I did was call the partner from General Motors who was leading their investment, and told him what happened. Was completely honest about it and asked if they would lead the round. And I think it was 2 a.m. in the morning, my time in Sweden, and it was like, 8 p.m. in Detroit, and he agreed. And boy, did I party that night. But it was still like, it was a super low moment. And so that was the second one. The third one was, that was May of 2022, and we were running out of money quickly. And we had started a Reg A as a backup plan with DealMaker.
Thank you.
In July of 2022, but we were quickly running out of money, and because of that situation with losing the commercial contract and our main investor pulling out, it took GM a lot more time to write us their own term sheet, lead the round, and we would have run out of money. And I ended up having to sell my house to bridge the company to last until GM funded us. And man, when you're 2 weeks away from running out of payroll and the company ending, that is a low point. Like, we're looking at all scenarios, firing half the company, and I ultimately made that decision to sell the house and bridge the company. And we were able to pull the money that we were raising in DealMaker at that time, which was also a huge help, because GM ended up not funding until December of 2022, and this was happening in September, and it was just a few months, and that can make all the difference. I wouldn't be sitting up here today if that were the case. So, there are always highs and lows, and you just have to have a steady temperament. You can't get too excited from the highs. You can't get too depressed from the lows. You just got to keep going.
Well, I really appreciate all three of you sharing those gritty moments, right? You guys are innovative. Any startup is hard, and the spaces that you guys are doing it in or have their own unique challenges, and I really appreciate that. After this panel, we're going to move on to something potentially more optimistic, future-looking, future of investing, exciting. Before we wrap, though, I had some conversations with founders in the crowd. Any questions before we wrap? Couple in the back.
Great panel. I've got a question for Omni. I know you mentioned you're rolling out the Omni One for home consumers. What's been the biggest, I guess you could say, unexpected adoption hurdle you've seen with home consumers compared to the enterprise customers? And then what are you guys doing to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge we had was getting the product to market. Hardware always takes longer than you think, costs more money than you think. So we launched it officially late last year, still working through our order backlog. So even over the holidays, if you bought one online, the wait time, the lead time was about 4 months. And so that's, of course, a big hurdle to adoption. And people want to buy something for Christmas and get it by Christmas, not in April. So, but we're almost past that, and that's going to be that's a big exciting moment for us, is to clear that backlog and then really be able to scale our sales and scale our marketing.
Other questions?
So Jan, I remember seeing something very similar to your product at the Renaissance Hotel in Dallas at QuakeCon 10 years ago. Just wondering if that was you.
Yes, that was us. QuakeCon 2013, wooden prototype.
Yeah. I was
early
there.
days.
I remember
Yeah.
seeing
Say
you guys.
wood prototype?
Wooden prototype.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a wooden prototype for
Oculus,
several
right?
years. Because to take a prototype from a garage to a product, that can take years. And then to take a product from an actual product of which you can make 1 or 2 or 10 to one that you can make 1,000 of, that takes another 2 years. It's a big difference. So it's a long process to bring a big piece of hardware to market.
Great. Just have one more question for Teague. Well, thanks for sharing the lows. That was, very relevant to us, believe me. Right. So institutional investors, do you have any tips on how to pursue them? E&I, for instance, is very relevant to us as a startup as well.
Yeah, I mean, the going through institutional due diligence is a nightmare, which is one of the reasons I like using DealMaker. But you need to have all your I's dotted, all your T's crossed. You have to be relentless. Like, we have 3 great institutional strategic partners, but I have 250 on my list. So way more no's than yeses. And I would credit a lot to building relationships over time. So allowing investors to follow your story is really important, keeping them updated with your progress. At some point, you might be too early for them, but if you are able to follow through with what you say you're going to do, if you tell them, this is my roadmap, in 6 months I'm going to be here, in a year I'm going to be here, in 2 years I'm going to be here, and you actually do that and show them, that creates a lot of confidence and conviction in their ability to invest in you. And I would say that that's probably the single biggest thing or piece of advice that I could give, is get in touch with them a lot, but then allow them to come with you on the journey before they invest.
Except that due diligence, if you're an AI company, you don't have to do it. So that helps.
Another question. I think we have one more. Oh, you have a question.
Hey, so I actually do have a question. This first follow-up is, have you read the book / watched Ready Player One?
Yes, we were in the movie. Warner Brothers contacted us and asked for 2 Omnis that we shipped to them, and we're part of the movie, yeah.
Wow. And then for that reason, too, as well, did you see a shift in trend / higher demand for you guys' products after that for other companies, but also for Lithium as well and any other company? Like, when you see that trend happen, there's obviously a high, and then it goes to a steady state and maybe to a low, or it still continues up. How do you manage or predict that type of trend when you're on the rise of, let's say, Ready Player One, you're in demand, and then all of a sudden, oh, the trend's over, or it's just steady?
Yeah, there's this thing called the Gartner hype cycle, which you may have seen, and VR and probably other technologies as well has really followed that hype cycle to a T, where you have the quick rise to the peak of the hype, and then invariably you go down to they call it the trough of disillusionment, and then slowly but steadily you have the slope of enlightenment. So VR went through that, and we went through that as well. When Ready Player One came out, it was around the peak, or even probably a little bit behind the peak. But certainly it creates a lot of interest and VR going mainstream. But VR is a type of technology where everybody predicted, or not everybody, but a lot of people predicted that, man, VR is going to be everywhere. And by 2016, there's going to be 100 million headsets in the market. And it just really didn't happen. It's a type of technology that has taken a lot more time to take off, to get mainstream adoption. And it's getting there slowly but steadily. It's now on that slope of enlightenment where more and more people do use it, various industries use it, but it hasn't been the type of technology that's taken this type of upward curve, which is not unusual. People are used to thinking that because of mobile and other technologies that take off like that. But a lot of technologies don't take off like that. The TV, for example, this is an old example, but notoriously took 20, 30 years to get mainstream adoption. And so VR, I think, is more in that category. There's quite a bit of user friction, and so it's not the type of technology that gets easily adopted, but it is getting more and more used. So, yeah.
Teague, do you want to answer that for lithium and the rise in demand, maybe the volatility of the pricing?
Yeah, lithium had a hockey stick moment back in 2022 where it went from 15,000 a ton up to 80,000 a ton. But this was actually bad because those costs were being passed through to the end user, the EV purchaser, and it made electric vehicles unaffordable. Maybe even that one material in the battery made electric vehicles unaffordable. And there's always a long tail on these types of things. I'm not going to sit here and say that the lull in EV adoption was based on the 2022 price of lithium, but you can certainly draw conclusions from that, or at least parallels. And now the price of lithium has come down a lot, and I think that we're starting to see a lot more affordable EVs. While there could be this valley in EV purchasing today, companies like BYD, Tesla, even General Motors sold 400,000 electric vehicles last year. Not many people know that. Tesla's well over 1 million, I think in the 1.2 to 1.5. And then, man, China is just rolling these EVs off the assembly line like America doesn't even know. I think that BYD is up almost near 4 million electric vehicles a year. And that's just one company. Obviously, America buys a lot of American cars, but China is really becoming, China is already the factory of the world, but China is really becoming the auto manufacturer of the world. If you go over to Europe, you will see so many Chinese vehicles and electric vehicles. So there's definitely a tail in terms of demand. When demand is high, everybody tries to pile in, and then it'll drop, and you'll start to see lower investment. But yeah, lithium is further up the supply chain, so that's why you see that lag as opposed to maybe something that's consumer facing like Omni. But it's certainly there as well.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Curtis.
This is actually a question for you, Teague. So what was your name again? Young?
Jan, yeah.
Yeah, you obviously have a consumer product that's easy to get retail investors excited about. It's tangible, they can see it, it's exciting, fun. Whereas for you have thousands of retail investors. How do you educate and get retail investors excited about lithium extraction? And then second question on that is, what level of transparency do you give to these potential investors? And that might even be a question for the CMO over here as well.
Maybe.
Oh, no,
Yes.
no, you. She's the CMO.
I'll let Teague answer, and I bet you have an answer too, because yours sounds very complicated. But go ahead, Teague.
I want to hear Manuel's as well. I think that for us, it's a little bit easier because lithium has become headlines in media and publications everywhere. But you actually almost answered the question yourself. Education and transparency is the key. We are a non-consumer facing product. Like lithium is actually a white powder. It looks like, other types of battery materials that you might not know of. And other than people with bipolar disorder, they're not buying lithium. So there's a lot of education involved, but we were extremely fortunate with the tailwinds and the momentum behind the electric vehicle revolution and lithium-ion batteries. They're called lithium-ion batteries. That was one of the first things I thought about when I was in the Solar. There are other elements that go into batteries, and depending on what type of chemistry is in your battery, there's nickel, there's iron, there's phosphate, there's manganese, there's cobalt, but they're called lithium-ion batteries. So we got really lucky in terms of that point for education. And then, transparency around the importance of it in terms of where we are as a business, in terms of our milestones that we're trying to achieve, our roadmap. Those are all things that we want to share with potential investors. And then ultimately, it's up to investors to make their decisions. But I am very interested, Manuel, in how you sell your product and educate your investor base on Timeplast.
I think it's the second most complex thing we've ever done at Timeplast. Because the chemistry is one thing, but after you have an incredible new technology, how do you sell it, right? So you hit it on the nail when you said that in order for you to continually attract investment, you need to meet your milestones, and so that hit me hard back in the day when I was thinking about how Apple grew to the level that it is right now, and how because we're very high up in the industrial chain, we manufacture the actual polymer itself from alcohol distilled from organic waste. Now, Timeplast is 70% water, which is our main competitive advantage against conventional plastic. We can be significantly cheaper than plastic, and it presents an opportunity for the future. But by the same token, how do you sell a product if you're a chemical technology that manufactures a raw material? Nobody buys raw pellets of plastics, right? But if you think about it, if you really think about it, the absolute best tool for companies to increase the revenue is the combination of AI and social media. Essentially, you have all of the eyeballs in the world that you can select. You can ask the algorithm, what is the person that would buy my product, and then you just present it to that person. Now, a raw plastic is such a abstract material that nobody buys, so we had to go and create an application for that. As you can imagine, we can make 150,000 applications, but we have started from 4-dimensional 3D printing filaments. Yes, if you guys are in the 3D printing hobby, it's one of the most complex niches, to enter it. But we are selling the only portfolio of 3D printed filaments in the world that are burnable. You can make a soap out of one of our filaments. You can time program it so you can create 4-dimensional objects. Imagine a seed pod that is able to grow a tree to fruition in the Sahara Desert without any human intervention. Essentially, it's an analog computer in which water is the battery. Because, you 3D printed an object with different Timeplast filaments that had a different time to it. So one of the channels that connect the water to the seed will dissolve in 1 week, the other one in 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, so that this seed can continue to grow into a tree without any human intervention. It's just one of the many applications that we can tap onto. Now we're building a manufacturing facility to make a straw, again, a big icon for the plastic pollution, but we're going after the bottle of water too. And imagine a bottle that self-destruct, since you can put water in between. Timeplast is all about water-soluble materials, right? Time-programmable water-soluble materials. It's in the name. So if you make a wall that has water in between, then you can program the time it takes for that bottle of water to dissolve by itself. So it will turn red before it dissolves, so it doesn't make a mess out of in the shelves. But imagine, a bottle of water, even after it's being thrown into the, I don't know, in a landfill or on a beach, you can see that bottle dissolving in front of your eyes. Now, we're using the sun and the grand chemistry of our planet to molecularly disintegrate down to the carbon-to-carbon level materials, which is the only way to go if you think about it. Conventional plastic nowadays take a significant amount of energy, resources, and a crazy chemistry for it to disappear. Now, Timeplast only requires sun and water, and since 70% of the surface of our planet, even our own bodies, are composed of water, then it only makes sense that we follow that nature guidance. So we're simulating all this into our products, which is why we believe we can scale up production, but niche by niche. It's a new type of business model, but we'll see what happens.
That's incredible. Thank you.
All right. I think that was the last question. So the next panel will start in 15 minutes. So if you guys want to grab a drink, and we'll meet you back here.